Chapter 46 to 50. The courtyard was built into the side of a mountain. I could peer over and see the surrounding foliage that littered the valley below. It was a beautiful sight, practically devoid of any kind of human touch. I wouldn't be surprised if it were a monastery in the past. Many of the amenities had been weathered and grounded from the passage of time, but it was still a wonderful location for some secretive experiments. I turned my head, seeing the familiar scene of a portal created by the application of the Kaleidoscope opening up. Zelrich walked out, followed by both Rin and Artoria. I gave Rin a nod and I looked towards Artoria, who met my eyes. There was only a quick glance before she looked away. Cute. I have no idea what our current status is or if we'll even have anything more in the future. I don't want to rush anything, so I didn't mind taking it slow. If it was meant to be, it was meant to be. Perhaps by the time I return she'll have her own heart settled. I clapped my hands. Everyone ready? I wasn't really told what I would be doing besides the basics. Rin stated, taking out a very familiar-looking wand. Well, isn't that a blast from the past? I eyed it with a smile forming on my face. Is she still as rambunctious? Rin sighed, drooping her shoulders. There's a reason I keep her turned off most of the time. I gently pat her shoulder. I know Zelrich doesn't particularly enjoy Ruby being around even if he created her. Funnily enough, he does enjoy annoying other people with her antics. Don't worry, you'll be able to craft your own personal mystic code in the future. Yeah, the old man said I would need to gather the materials by myself though. She deadpanned. That would require me traveling around with Ruby. She waved the stick in annoyance. I'll keep a lookout for anything useful for you. I offered. Her expression quickly turned around. Thanks. She beamed, sincerely thankful. What about you, have you made your own yet? I know you both can't exactly share. Truthfully, I'm a tad curious as well. Zelrich chimed in. I personally wouldn't settle for anything below a certain level and your resources were far inferior to mine. True, and I was quite lucky being able to find some compatible materials. I glanced over to Artoria. I think Saber is the only one that's seen it before. It was a good sword. She commented evenly. I withdrew my prized blade from my ring, allowing it to glisten under the light of the stars. I named it Mirage. With that I did a small movement, allowing the colors to flow out. Glass? Zelrich mumbled, eyeing it carefully. No, that isn't quite right, but then how did you connect, OH? Wonderful, what an intuitive design, and the craftsmanship is excellent. He exclaimed. Brilliant, just as I would expect from myself. He chuckled. Though if it weren't for the bauble at the end, it would still fall short of my jeweled sword. Really can't hide anything from you. Zelrich just gave me a cheeky smile, bringing out his own sword. I had a small urge to swipe it, and I think he noticed because he gave me an I dare you look. Well, it's your turn, Rin. I held back a smirk. As much as I cared about Rin, I would forever enjoy these next few moments. Rin sighed, activating her wand. I'm back. The wand took to the air, flying in circles before landing before us. Master, I have awakened once more, it's time to rid the world of evil. Magical girl Rin will dispense justice. Damn it, Ruby. Rin slapped her palm to her face. Saber. Ruby happily flew towards our resident knight. Hello, Ruby. Artoria gave a small smile. One of Zelrich's creations, a kaleidoscope. Basically a sapient wand with the ability to access the kaleidoscope, and an excellent tool for a beginner like Rin. Despite what one may think, this thing was a very beautiful work of art. Ruby, it's time to calm down. Zelrich didn't raise his voice, but Ruby practically snapped to attention. Yes, creator. The wand stopped zipping around and hovered right next to Rin. Also, meet my grandson. Zelrich gestured to me. Hello Ruby, it is an absolute pleasure to meet you. I couldn't help my lips curling up. Grandson. Ruby's voice sounded shocked. Since when? About a week or so ago. Rin snorted. Sounds about right. I shrugged. The magical wand came over to inspect me. My magical girl senses are tingling. You're either the super secret masked male hero that saves magical girls at the last possible moment, or a demon in disguise. I couldn't help but blink. Why not both? Oh ho, you walk the path of the anti-hero then? Forever shrouded in darkness, only the true love of a pure maiden can bring you towards the light. Ruby flew back towards Rin. Rin, we must recruit him to our cause. Rin looked at me in exasperation. Ruby, let's put a pin in that for now, we have a job to do and I think the old man is going to get impatient. Fine, fine. Ruby deflated. But I want to braid Saber's hair again later. I would not be against it, you did a wonderful job the last time. Artoria chimed in. How does that even work? Did she use magic or is she just that good at it? And now I want to see Artoria with her hair braided. Awesome. Sleepover is decided, we shall eat lots of ice cream and talk about boys. Ruby declared. Rin finally grabbed the talking wand. Yeah, let's do that. Her voice dripping with sarcasm. Take these calculations and start running your simulation. Don't forget to scan the ritual site. Zelrich helpfully added. You got it, Master. Ruby somehow saluted regardless of not having any limbs. She hovered over the magical circle, light emitted from her point and washing over the area. Materials categorized, begin conceptual simulation. Well, the moment of truth. I said to no one in particular. Zelrich was having Rin run the calculations, I didn't particular mind, it's not like she could ruin anything, if I were to be blunt about it. Again, I don't mind stepping back and allow Rin to have a learning experience. Master, your calculations show a 42.38% chance of success. Only 42%. Rin looked a bit defeated. Not too bad. Zelrich interrupted her dejection. Realistically, neither me or my grandson would have broke 60% without some ancillary means or just brute forcing the issue. He pulled a small stone shard out of his pocket. Let's add this and recalculate, Ruby. Scanning. She looked over the shard. 97.93% chance of success. A shard from the original Gate of Sky, do I even want to know where you got that? I just shook my head. Well, Rin, you heard the lady, let the show begin. Okay, I got this. She said to herself, quietly. I saw her circuits light up and her amateurish pulling on the kaleidoscope. I wasn't insulting her ability, it was merely a description of her current skill. To even be called an amateur was actually quite the compliment when it came to this specific magic. Ruby, lend me a hand. Rin waved the wand around, forming the gate up as the materials responded to her call and floated into the air. They started revolving, mishmashing and fell into a formation that resembling an archway. I think I got it. She finally said after a few moments. Zelrich nodded towards me, walking to the staff of Magnus. Hold it for a moment. He grabbed the shaft and pulled on Rin's own spell work to anchor the spell to the divine construct. The portal stabilized as Rin slowly backed off. What a cheeky little staff. Ruby commented. I should show it who's the boss. She harumphed. I could tell that the portal was a success, it should hold for 2 uses, one there and the return trip. Well done, Rin. I complimented. Of course, she tried to show off a haughty attitude, but she was preening under the praise. Well, looks like it's time. I swept my gaze around. Got everything you need? Zelrich asked, more of a formality really. Yeah, that and then some. Rin, why don't I show you some stuff I hid inside, in case you ever need to hear again for any reason. Zelrich put a hand on her shoulder, leading them inside the building, giving me and Artoria a moments of privacy. Come along, Ruby. Yes, Creator, the wand also floated with them. I just shook my head, realizing what he was doing. Rin apparently did too as she didn't say anything and followed. I looked towards Artoria who returned my gaze briefly. I guess this is goodbye for a little bit. Do you know how long your trip will last? She took a few steps closer, idly playing with her hands. Inside for me. A while probably, for outside, I would say not any longer than 2 weeks. I hazard a guess, only doing a few mental calculations. I see, She cut herself off not sure what to say. There isn't a need to push yourself. I said gently. Giving her a smile. I'll be back in a bit, and we can have a talk about how to go from here, be it friends or something more. The important thing is to figure out what you want. She took a hesitant step forward, grabbing onto my sleeve. I will look forward to your return. I saw the faintest pink on her cheeks. There weren't any more words that needed to be said, with a step forward, I pushed into the portal. Death. Cold. Resentment. I was bombarded with these feelings as soon as I walked through. The coldness of this realm wasn't natural, it was tainted with the feeling of death and the resentment of souls that refused to rest. I could stand on mountains in Skyrim, in the blizzards, and not be as cold as I was right now. The term, deathly cold, never held more truth than it did here. The cold air literally penetrated my skin. Ironically, I was standing over a pit of molten lava. From where it came, I had no idea. Only a small, stone bridge holding me up, and allowing me passage over safely. One might think, just fly over. Except, normal laws no longer apply. Trying to fly up will not necessarily take me to the sky. I wanted to continue my muse, take in my surroundings, but I was disturbed by the most rude undead that stumbled from whatever hiding places they laid. Skeletons, zombies, some other types of abominations that breathed necrotic energy from their pores. I wasted no time, several runic circles hovered over my head, expelling volleys of spells at any undead that dared to get in my way. These couldn't even compare to the draugrs I fought back in Skyrim, especially not those really strong ones, though I had the feeling that dangers lurked nearby. My casual stroll off the bridge was met with the cliff of a mountain as I overlooked the valley below. I couldn't help my eyes widening as I saw an uncountable number of entities limping about, undead creatures of all kinds refusing to stay dead as they continued their mockery of life. Well, I guess it was time for a certain sword to shine. Dawnbreaker was freed from the confines of my ring. Its holy light exploded out, grabbing the attention of every undead in the area. They all stared up, some with more intelligence than others. I would have to go through them regardless. Sliding down the rocky terrain, many came up to meet my assault. Stumbling through stones, cracked and rusted weapons in hands. The former figures of warriors, from ages past, they meant nothing under the light of Dawnbreaker. My holy sword cutting clean through any undead it came across. Holy light exploded on contact, blowing away those that got too close. I had gotten a bit better at handling this weapon. I realized that it had a few more uses than just being good against undead. Its light, the anti-undead properties, could be utilized more malleably. I dove into a large group, no coordination as they tried to climb over one another to get to me. I could only assume they despised the living, their resentment allowed only themselves and those like them to exist. Dawnbreaker was slamming into the ground, the holy light pulsed out like a dome, the walls of golden energy disintegrating everything it touched. The tide seemed endless, as even I killed dozens, hundreds, double that would take the space. RORR, a loud shout echoed, the ground shaking and the mountains trembled. A massive hand broke through the earth, grabbing any undead unlucky enough to be in its grasp and pulling them down. I was pretty sure I heard chewing, and the earth began to crack, something was breaking through. It was massive. I don't think I could call it a zombie, but something with that nature. It still possessed flesh, and I doubt its former life was a human one. Some kind of phantasmal species. I was betting a giant of some sort. It towards over me, maybe 30 or 40 meters in height. With a thought, mirage appeared from my ring in my empty hand. The spell circles lit up, filling with magical energy. The monstrosity lumbered towards me, its rotten flesh filling my nose with its putrid scent. Pieces of its body could be seen falling off, other places where the bones could be seen. It almost fell down, trying to reach me at its fastest speed. I didn't move, continuously pulling on the kaleidoscope to empower my spell. The tip of my blade slowly moved up, hovering center mass of the abomination as it tried to reach for me. Ether cannon. My voice echoed around the valley. It was massive, the biggest one I've done in this life. The undead's arm disappeared, as did most of its body. My spell carried on, cleaving through an army of undead that followed in its wake. A small smile rose on my face. It felt good to cut loose like this and not worry about collateral damage. I didn't have time to dwell on it as my eyes noticed something at the end of the path I had just opened up in the tide of undead. There was a pathway that opened up between the mountainous cliffs. It was paved with stone and an archway, clearly indicating the correct way to go. Roar. Screech. A few more earth-shattering roars shook He Valley. Huge body parts began to break through the icy tundra, re-entering the world after their slumber. Well, time to skedaddle. Reinforcement filled my body and I shot off, not allowing myself to be swarmed any longer. As my feet carried me past the threshold, the smaller undead refused to enter and I could only look back in confusion. I decided not to dwell on it any longer and kept going in the dark tunnel. A ball of fire lit up above my hand, giving me some light. I was somewhat on edge. I would be a fool to let my guard down after all, but I didn't sense the presence of anything here. The tunnel carried on, maybe for another mile or so until I saw a light at the end where it opened up. The air was slightly more pristine, like the undead essences were thinner over here. My eyes immediately were taken by the sight of a castle not too far away, but more than that, I saw someone mediating on the ground, the snow even refusing to stain her visage. She had purple hair with the faintest red hue, she was a beauty almost beyond compare. Impaled in the ground next to her was a spear that radiated bloodlust, enough to give me pause this far away. I trembled though when her eyes slowly opened, their red irises focusing solely on me. I'm pretty sure I found my teacher. There was a forceful silence that permeated every corner of this area. This little haven that seemed to exist within this realm of death and cold. Was it fear? One so ingrained on the inhabitants of this desolate realm, those abominations that continue to exist through malice and regret? It seemed like the lingering touch of death even refused to come anywhere near this woman, the true ruler of this realm. She stared at me, not making a sound as I approached. My feet breaching the otherwise pristine snow was the only sound that existed in these moments. Every step I took was evaluated, judged, and weighed. I felt the gaze of Zelrich, my previous self, and I could only attribute it to that same feeling. As if I was being completely seen through, all my secrets laid bare before her eyes. It almost made me pause, give a second thought to my objective. If Zelrich was gentle, then this woman threw away all conventions of civility with nothing but her gaze. The feeling rising up in my chest, anxiety, repressed feelings I didn't want to acknowledge. I felt as if I would be found wanting. How many times in one's life are your worst parts laid bare, shown to something to be judged? Under her intense stare, all of it was bubbling up to the surface. I wasn't unaware of my own issues, my shortcomings, and my faults. Despite what one may think, having another lifetime's worth of memories doesn't mean I don't feel emotions, that I don't have problems and fears. Irrational some of them may be, but I was still only 18 years old. I am petty sometimes, perhaps a bit too whimsical and prone to flights of fancy. My greed gets the better of me and I can admit at being a tad lustful. No, my memories don't stop these things, they give me perspective. Someone who is depressed can't just fix themselves by knowing they're depressed. Wisdom is not the same as maturity, I knew that, along with all my own issues. This didn't stop me, it didn't halt my steps as each one felt heavier. Even now, I don't know the true reason I'm here. The obvious answer was that I wanted to become stronger, but why? Did it have to do with the spider? Did I perhaps perceive some kind of debt to my past self and this world? The cynical part of myself could tell this world to fuck off and I could go anywhere. No, it was much more selfish, childish even. I wanted to prove something, prove my existence to the world. It was foolish, stupid even, but I felt the need to be relevant. My steps finally halted, only a few feet away from the legendary woman, still in the same positions, her eyes never leaving me. I dropped to the ground, forehead touching the cold tundra underneath as I prostrated. Please, teach me. She didn't answer and I stayed prone. There was only the slightest fluctuation, like vitality returned to this land and I heard the sound of long breath being taken and the world shifting. I tilted my head up to see her taking a breath of cold air. So old, yet still so young. Her words sounded tired. Raise your head, child. I lifted myself up, into a position on my knees. Will you be my teacher, then? To come so far, the effort itself is a gesture I cannot ignore. She stood up slowly. You have potential. Her words were simple and direct. I followed suit, standing up. I brushed the snow off my clothes, only pausing as I felt an intense bloodlust lock onto me. Scathach placed a hand on her spear, looking back towards me. Defend yourself, were the only words of warning I received. Her cursed spear rocketed towards my heart, no sympathy for my well-being. Bloodlust and magical energy surged around like a torrent. The boosted gear appeared in my hand, blocking the impossibly sharp weapon, but I was still flung back several yards before regaining my footing. I wasted no time in pulling out Mirage. 4 birds. My sword phantoms launched towards the still form of my new teacher. Curious, was her response, merely staring at the incoming attack, leveling her spear and thrusting 4 times in a single breath. Magical thorns filled the air, piercing and stabbing in the direction of her thrusts. Similar to my sword phantoms, they tore apart my own attacks and came through to me. Shield of Asgard. I quickly actualized a handful of runes, creating a not-so-great application of my shielding spell. It cracked under the strain, shattering with ease, but the attack seemed to dissipate with that much defense. Foolish, Scathach said with a slight frown. Your application of runes is an insult. I didn't have time to register her words, She was in front of me, spear piercing through my lower stomach. I wanted to say something, but my throat was now filled with blood. Pain was an old friend, but that didn't mean I wasn't happy to see it again. Your instinct is underdeveloped. There was no mercy in her eyes. Boost. I grit out, blood dripping out of my mouth as I grabbed onto her spear and swung my sword towards her neck. Her response was to crack me across the face with her fist, dislodged her spear, and follow up with a kick to my new wound. It happened quickly, I was taken down in but a moment. Too young. She sighed. She just looked at me, allowing me time to stand back up. Distort. I said quietly, tens of illusions surrounded me now. A bit interesting. She looked around, and I could tell she saw through them all with but a glance. She slammed the butt of her spear onto the cold ground, a wave of magical energy burst out, dissipating all my clones. I created several runic circles overhead. Lightning. I knew it wouldn't be much, but I didn't want to give up so easily. Better, but far from enough. Her spear met the incoming magical attacks, a quick twirl left the lightning completely defeated against her might. My body filled up with enhancement magics, and I pushed it forward again. Boost. I kicked off the ground, sword in hand as I lashed out towards her. My sword seeking the exposed skin of her neck, but a familiar spear popped up, diverting my blade with minimal effort. It seemed to come alive as I couldn't even recover from my swing, and the butt of her spear already met the side of my head, dazing me. Again. She stated. I steadied my erratic breathing, my body was starting to feel faint, possibly from the bloodlust. I don't think the pain had quite caught up with me yet. My blade was held evenly, as I readied myself. Swallow returns. Oh. She just made the smallest sound as I moved. It did not fill me with confidence, and I think my blade reflected that. Because when I should have made contact, I instead felt the feeling of death approach. There was no time to think, the familiar darkness of unconsciousness claimed me. I awoke to strange surroundings, stone walls all around me in a scene that wouldn't be misplaced in a different era. About time. A familiar, feminine voice rang out. I had thought I hit you too hard on the head for a bit. My thoughts returned to me, blinking in realization as to what happened. I don't even know how she defeated me. Sasaki Kojiro told me there were holes in the technique, no doubt she could see through it so easily as well. But that's why I'm here, to get better. He has a hard head, he can take it. Another voice I recognized sounded. I instinctively looked at my hand for Drake, but it wasn't there. I gathered my wits, looking around. I was laid back in a chair at a large table that could accommodate dozens of people. At the other end was Scathach, with the boosted gear sitting in front of her. But that wasn't all. Dawnbreaker, Ascalon, Mirage. All of my armaments, my stuff was sitting about as she went over it all. I looked down at my ring completely missing. Did you take my stuff? I couldn't help but asked. Yes. She said with no reservations. Can I have it back? No. Please. It's mine now. Her lips curled up as Dryag let out a laugh. She took the boosted gear out of my soul when I was unconscious. The realization dawned on me even after seeing the gauntlet sitting there. Damn it, Drake, what have you been telling her? Everything. He said with amusement. I couldn't help but scowl. I did not like my stuff being taken. It almost gave me an itchy feeling seeing someone else play with my stuff. You know, if you wanted a ring from me that badly, there are different ways of going about it. He defaults to flirting when he's embarrassed. Fuck off, Drake. It's alright, I don't have much interest in boys. I prefer men. Scathach's words went straight of the jugular. Damn, I would have loved to fight you in my prime. The dragon said happily. Scathach smiled lightly at the comment, turning her attention fully towards me. You have some potential. She said plainly. But your foundation is abysmal. We will have to build it up from the ground, that is why I sealed your magical ability for now. Wait, what? I tried to pull on any amount of magical energy, my circuits refused to respond. I have devised a plan, we shall begin tomorrow. Her words authoritative, leaving no room for response. Relish this peace, there shall be none once we begin. I am starting to have second thoughts. Maybe I should just make a break for it. Grab my stuff, and hope for the best. I think I like my chances better with that horde of undead. Dryad can go fuck himself and can stay here with the scary lady. Hit him. Drake said, across the room. I recognized that face. He said something about one of us in his head. God damn it, Drake. Scat Hack nodded her head. I shall remedy his attitude through training. Well, what's the worst that could happen? I felt much colder than I had yesterday. One doesn't realize how good they have it until it's gone. My innate magical abilities were sealed along with my ability to generate magical energy. I couldn't even bring out my wings at the moment. Despite what one may think, the usage of the Kaleidoscope did require being able to draw in magical energy to use. It just so happened that once one got good enough, it became a secondary thought as you had access to a near infinite amount. My only thought on how she achieved this was through the use of primordial runes. To also take Drake out of my soul without me even feeling or knowing about it, how scary. I don't think I could even do that. It just goes to show how absurd her magical abilities are. Change. My new teacher threw a mess of clothes at me. Pardon. I caught them awkwardly. Did I stutter? Change out of your clothes into these. I looked them over, coarse and not the best, but they would probably hold better than my current garb and they looked a fair bit warmer. Fine. Well? She looked at me expectantly. Are you not going to give me privacy? You have nothing I haven't seen before, boyo. Ah, so my teacher is a per-dash. My words were cut off by a spear smacking me on the head. What was that? She raised her deadly spear at me with an eyebrow raised. I said my teacher is a pervert. I rubbed where I had just been smacked, giving her a look. A small smile curled up on her face. Well, you have some balls at least. She turned around and walked out of the room. What a hard woman to read. I thought for sure she would kick my ass there. Perhaps not the best decision on my part, but I am nothing if not stubborn. I quickly changed, setting my clothes to the side, because I don't have my fucking ring anymore. Which I still am livid about. Walking out of the room, Scat Hack was waiting for me. Come, daylight wanes, and you will require all the help you can get. Daylight? This place was a perpetual twilight, covered in clouds and snowstorms. Actually, I haven't experienced that a night here. I think I was unconscious for that, or maybe the day/night cycle isn't the same as outside. There. She heaved her spear up, pointing towards a mountain on the horizon. What? I had no idea what she was talking about it. Start climbing. She said simply. One more time. You will climb that mountain or die on it. If I see you before you finish, you will meet the end of my spear. I opened my mouth to retort, but the bloodlust she was emitting threw off any sarcastic remark I had, mostly. Why that mountain? I mean, there were plenty of mountains, that wasn't even the biggest or the smallest, it just seemed odd is all. Because I said so, get going. She tossed me a sack full of food. I caught it, peering inside, looked like enough to last me a few weeks if I rationed it well. Strangely enough, there was no water. Was there a reason for that? The dragon shall accompany you as well. She thought for a moment, retrieving Drake from my ring that she was holding on her finger, as if taunting me. He expressed his desire to witness your training, no aid shall be given. She pushed Drake back into my soul without even considering me current state. I felt the breath getting knocked out of me as she roughly shoved the dragon back inside, falling to the ground, gasping for air. Bitch. I couldn't help but grit out under my breath. Do I at least get one of my weapons? I would really appreciate Dawnbreaker right about now. Who knows what kind of things are lurking up there. Of course, what do you take me for? She gave the most innocent smile. Dare I ask where it is? Her expression turned sharp. Top of the mountain, get going. Of course. Probably shouldn't have called her a bitch. Drake said, helpfully. Yeah, thanks, Drake, my traitorous partner. Are you still on about that? Betrayed, by the one I trusted most in this world. Trusted the most? I could practically hear him rolling his eyes. Literally gave my soul. Alright, just get it out of your system. I think I'm done. I started walking. The base of the mountain was a fair distance away and I was no longer superhuman in all my physical abilities. I would actually have to pace myself. How sluggish I felt was horrible. I looked back a few times, but Scat Hack just disappeared and it's not like I had any ability to detect her right now. What exactly did you two talk about? Just some random stuff, then we talked about and how best to train you. I filled in some gaps as she devised some things, but most stuff she could glean by herself. Did you really think I just gave away all your secrets? Nah, I'm just annoyed at the situation more than anyone in particular. I simply don't like other people having my stuff. I could understand it, but that didn't mean I enjoyed it happening. My whole purpose here was for training. I was throwing myself at her mercy for that. I would bitch and complain, but I would keep trudging on. I came upon a forest, is what I would usually call such a thing. Except, this was a land of the dead, filled with death and resentment. There would be nothing growing here that was safe. Even these trees, were they qualified to be called trees? They were dead, they existed in a perpetual death state. I had no idea how they continued to exist, something inherent for this realm, but I didn't question it for the moment. I looked around, finding a few branches that weren't drenched in snow, somewhat drier than the others. They would have to work. I could only assume that I would need some tinder for fires when I got higher up. Maybe even a makeshift torch, if I could find some other stuff to fasten along with it. Unfortunately, my load had to be light. I was basically human right now. Luckily there was a part starting at the base, something resembling a stone inlay that ascended the mountain. My first step onto what could be considered the mountain, and I felt a sense of dread wash over me. There was something here, something watching me now. I could feel it even with my current power. No wonder I was supposed to climb this mountain. Something was very, very wrong with this particular peak. Was this fear? Something here could actually elicit fear in me. An unfathomable existence. The current me was but a tiny insect in its eyes. Drake. I whispered. Yeah, I feel it too. That was all the confirmation I needed, and he didn't elaborate further. He probably knew more than he was saying, but as Scathack said, he wouldn't be giving any help. I barely got up the slope when a skeleton came stumbling down right towards me, missing an arm and one of its feet was facing the wrong way. The most noticeable feature was the sword still carried in its hand. Rusted and chipped in various places, but it looked to be a weapon not made with mundane materials. I doubt it would break even if I spent days hitting a rock. The glow in its eyes settled specifically on me, nothing else in the world mattered. Its feet carried him, stumbles and missteps, but it remained upright. There was no martial prowess in its strike, no intent or probing maneuvers. Simply a creature with minimal intelligence acting on its baser instincts. Even still, I was purely human right now. This little skeleton, something I could kill with a flick of my finger previously, it could end my life. It was a humbling thought. But I refused to allow something so small dictate my heart. I wasn't bereft of emotions. Fear was something all living things face, but it would not swallow me. I took a step forward, watching its arm. The lackadaisical swing, easily able to cut through stone, came towards my side. I took a step to the right, allow it to pass safely by me. The skeleton stumbled forward, breaking its own momentum and tumbling to the ground. I stomped on its hand and pulled apart the arm. The necrotic power holding it together crumbled easily enough. This was perhaps the most basic of the undead species. The sword felt wrong in my hand, the weight was off, the design was something not suited for my preferences. It was no masterpiece, something haphazardly created by someone with barely an idea of what they were doing, but it would serve my purpose. Mainly, survival. I scavenged what else I could. Some strips of fabric still clinging to the bones would be useful later on. Finishing up, I lifted my head, staring up at top. It pierced through the cloud, my eyes were unable to see the peak. Still a long ways to go. I continued my ascent. The air grew noticeably colder as I went up, and not just because of the altitude. This mountain, I could only call it cursed, and that was saying something in this wretched land. There were a few strange phenomena. Stones were hovering in the air, no sign of ever falling down. I stared at it for a few moments, finding my own rock to toss up. I only furrowed my brow when it came right back down without any issue. With another though, I grabbed a second stone and threw it towards one of the ones stuck in the air. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, right as the two stones collided. The one that was suspended in the air rocketed straight down like a comet, creating a hole that I could not see the bottom of. Yeah, let's not mess with those anymore. This place is fucking weird, and not in a fun way. Return, a voice bellowed out. My head swiftly turned to the origin. There was a half-frozen corpse sitting at the entrance to a small land bridge that connected two cliff sides. It was the only way forward, and this hulking undead was filled with hatred, eyes locked onto me. Frankly, I was surprised it could talk. Can I pass? I tried. Return. The ice around it shattered as it stood up, grasping at its massive sword impaled in the ground. It took a step forward, the snow displaced at its weight. The ground shuddered under each step, its metal armor still holding strong over its body regardless of its weathered look. I gripped my sword tightly, staring at the hulking undead. This thing was on an entirely different level compared to the one I took out a bit ago. Return, it continued to bellow, swinging its massive sword recklessly toward me with each step. I instinctively took a few steps back as it continued to approach. Gripping my sword tightly, I tried to move in between the swings, getting up into its guard, but I realized that most of its body was still completely covered in armor. Could I even penetrate this? The moment I took to contemplate, it swung down its empty hand. The massive fist bearing down at me was met with the flat of my blade. It knocked me to the ground, the force enough to make me cough blood. I quickly rolled to the side, a massive steel blade penetrating the earth where I was a moment prior. I wobbly got to my feet and retreated dozens of yards back to regain my composure. I eyed the monstrosity. It looked at me. "Return," it shouted one final time before turning around and going back to where it was before. Fuck. I slumped down, feeling the spot where I got hit. Definitely going to be bruised later. How was I supposed to get past that thing? Really, the only spot I could do any chance of damage was the eye slots in its helmet, but that was such a small opening in the midst of its flailing. I stood there lost in thought before some realization dawned on me. I'm an idiot, aren't I? Yup. Usually, I would retort something towards the dragon, but I couldn't find it in myself to do so right now. I looked up towards the sky, letting the snow land on my face. When was the last time I simply swung my sword? I just sighed. Was I relying too much on my past knowledge? I always thought it my greatest boon, but at this moment, it was more of a crutch. A simple stab through the helmet and I thought of it as some great hurdle. I knew I was all messed up, unfocused, magic and martial ability just flung about, but why have I never just practiced swinging my sword before? It seemed like the simplest thing in the world. Was it arrogance? Did I feel it was beneath me? The master of the Kaleidoscope, the magician? I couldn't help but laugh at my own stupidity. My feet planted firmly in the ground, I held my sword with both hands. Slash. Slash. Thrust. Slash. Slash. Thrust. I was here to train, I need to start from the very basics. Step forward, overhead slash. Bend knees, thrust. Left. Right. Deep breath, release and swing. My hands dropped to my side, sword still clutched tight in my fingers. You need to eat. Dregs, word breaking me from my fugue. How long was it this time? I dropped down, getting comfortable on the ground and allowed my breathing to settle as I closed my eyes. I felt the cold air scrape across my face. It was hard to stay focused in such situation, but I had much practice at this point. About 2 days if my estimation is correct. This place, it make you lose track of time. No, maybe it was even more than that. It makes you lose your sense of self. How many days have I stayed back here, and just continued my practice? I think we were almost up to 2 months now. The day-night cycle was not the same outside, it almost seemed random. Perhaps there was a order that would reveal itself if I continued to pay attention for several more months, but at the moment it just seemed to change based on its own mood. Not just that either, it seems as though the longer I spend in this realm, the more I change along to match its properties. My need to consume food had decreased exponentially, to the fact that I had to be reminded to eat after a couple days. That isn't even mentioning water, I haven't felt the need to drink anything. What a strange place. I swept my gaze around the area, hundreds of skeletal bodies littered my little haven. They hadn't stopped coming for me in these past weeks, though they only came from below. It seemed like besides that one weird guard, no other undead were above me. I think it's about time I moved on. I wasn't talking to anyone in particular, even Drake was silent. There wasn't much to pack up, I kept my food safe and secure, my blade had stayed with me this entire time and I only grabbed scraps from the things I've fought before. Let's see if these past days have been good to me. It didn't take long to meet my familiar friend once again. I had probed him a couple of times since our first meeting, just seeing what exactly he was. Dropping my sack to the ground, I took a step towards his position. Return, it bellowed, standing up. Maybe the magics holding it together force it to say such a thing instead of being the only word it can actually speak. I was much less nervous this time, my hands extremely steady as I continued to walk forward, matching its lumbering steps. It swung its sword in the same way, a haphazard swing horizontally to cleave me in half. I merely took a step back, watching it miss. I think my previous thinking process was flawed, I continued to think of it in a manner of just brute forcing me way through this thing. It recovered its swing, ready to cleave me in twain yet again. I stepped to the side, waiting. The inevitable edge of the blade came towards me, I ducked down, allow it to pass safely over my head and impale itself onto the cliffside. I looked up, seeing the thing trying to pull free its massive blade to no avail. Well, that's one way to do it. I muttered, lifting my own weapon. The undead's free hand tried to swing at me, but I deflected it much better this time, and I followed up with a swift stab through into the eye socket of its helmet. The magics dispersed with a visible effect, the animated corpse falling to the ground. That was much easier than I had built it up to be. You aren't exactly a beginner. Your issue was having a shallow foundation yet possess exceptionally powerful abilities. Yeah, that's true. If I had to describe it, I was perhaps an upside-down pyramid. These past months have been me slowly added more bricks on the bottom to even it out, even just a little bit. Well, let's keep going then. I hesitantly put a foot on the brittle-looking rock bridge that allowed one to cross from one cliff side to another. Natural in formation, but it appeared as though it would break at any moment. I guess it would be comical to die in such a mundane way instead of all the other nonsense going on here. There was a cave up ahead, dark and eerie. Now, in a normal circumstance, I would have explored this, but the me right now was overly cautious. If that undead was guarding something, it was most likely in here. Not only that, I had a very bad feeling crawl up my spine even looking down that black hole. Staying the hell away. I just continued on a bit longer, only to visibly shudder when my clear path came to an end. The inlays that I hoped would take me to the top stopped here. All that was facing me was the rocky side of the snowy cliff. Well, fuck. I resolved myself, finding a good spot, and I began truly climbing. No turning back now. The sharp stones were quick to tear into my hands, only a few dozen feet up and my skin had already been punctured. My blood seeping out made the stones all the more difficult to grab onto. I could only wrap them in cloth to continue my ascent. The air was getting noticeably thinner with every few dozen feet I continued up, and more strange phenomena started occurring. The cold didn't even have to be mentioned, my vision was significantly lowered in this blizzard weather. I maybe had a 4 or 5 meters I could see in any direction, the only exception was something strange off to the side. Fuck, the words escaped my lips as my foothold crumbled and my hand slipped. I tumbled down, hitting several rocks before landing on a small, protruded edge that allowed me to regain my hold. Blood ran down the corner of my lips, I felt my throat full of the stuff. I hit that ledge hard, and the fall wasn't exactly soft. Sucking in a cold breath of air, I steadied my legs and grabbed onto another jagged edge to pull myself up again. How many feet did I reclimb? Everything looked the same and my vision was heavily impaired. I think the only valid measurement of distance was the fact that I was getting noticeably colder the higher I went. Which, you may expect, climbing a mountain, but this was noticeably colder, as in every few feet it dropped a couple degrees. I don't think I even got far, practically impossible to measure actual distance, when I heard a sound above me. Things were falling down, smacking against the cliff and coming right towards me. As quickly as I could, I stabbed my sword into the mountain as hard as I could and grabbed onto it, ducking my head under my arms. Rocks fell down on me, some merely hurt, intent to leave bruises, others sliced open my skin on their descent. Luckily, none managed to hit my head, lest my skull take a beating. When the last boulders and rocks finally passed, I only climbed a few more feet until I saw a familiar sight. The strange thing that caught my attention before I fell the first time. I saw a castle, completely upside down. It was perhaps the source of those stones from earlier. Did it exist in a state of perpetual falling? Such a thing goes against the logic of humanity, but here that can be true. If it was always falling, that meant as soon as something disturbed its stasis, the momentum would carry it downwards, like those rocks. No wonder they buried themselves so deep. Perhaps there was a ceiling on their velocity, but I did not want to test that. My breathing was becoming too ragged, I didn't dwell on it. The only solace was that I found a tree jutting out of a small cliff nearby that I could sit down and rest. I took out some wood and some pieces of scrap metal. I hit my sword against the scraps, trying to light up some tinder I bundled together. Come on. My hands shook slightly, I was freezing, and a little fire would do me good. Just a little spark, please. I whispered. I continued until my fingers became numb, nothing. I couldn't get a single ember to appear. A sudden urge to throw my sword off the cliff appeared, but I quickly squashed it down. No point in torturing myself more than this place is already doing. There were thoughts in the back of my head, little whispers telling me to just go back down and continue with what I was doing before. Fuck this mountain. I stood up, feet a little wobbly. I took my sword in both hands and began to swing it again. The same rhythmic movements that I have spent the past couple months mastering. It was soothing, perhaps even a little warm in its familiarity. It allowed me to just ever so slightly take my mind off this biting cold. My eyes slowly opened, ice literally falling off my eyelashes as I moved them. I had somehow managed to catch a few hours of sleep in this god-forsaken weather. I can only thank the remnants of my devil physiology that I didn't freeze to death. Even with most everything being sealed away, there were some things just inherent to my physical body. I'm not even sure how she went about sealing some of my racial abilities. Perhaps she more so shackled certain aspect of my physiology in addition to my source of magical energy. I wouldn't die of hypothermia. Probably. And I don't think any of my body parts would be frozen. The snowstorm did die down, a little bit. I could see maybe a few more feet in front of me now, small mercies. Wait, I abruptly turned my head and looked at the tree that was providing me with some manner of shelter. I reached up to grab something hanging off on a small string. Teacher. I whispered lightly, holding a piece of flint in my hand. I cradled the small object like it was the most precious treasure. I gathered my stuff back up again and struck my sword against the small piece of flint. It was much easier to light a fire now. A quick strike of my sword and sparks flew, turning into little embers. These pieces of scraps I've kept dry all this time, and some tinder I found at the base of the mountain. Warmth. The tree hanging overhead blocked most of the snowfall, allowing my little fire to persist through this deathly air. I needed this, it filled me with resolve to keep going. That's all I could do right now. I would stay here for a bit longer and warm up, then continue on. Maybe another day or so, to allow this fire to run its course. How likely was I to find another little area like this to take another break? Cooking a potato over the fire, I allowed myself to enjoy this little prize. But all good things couldn't continue. I noticed the storm starting to pick up again, and I didn't know if I should continue staying here for longer or not. Almost as if the world to give me a boot, a large swath of cold air blew in from the side, completely enveloping the fire and snuffing it out with an overlay of snow. Fuck this mountain. I wanted to rant and rave, but I couldn't even find the energy to do that right now. I slowly grabbed all my stuff once again and searched for another foothold to continue on. My hands already numb to the pain, I couldn't even feel the sharp rocks anymore. Moments after leaving the safety of my fire, and I couldn't even recall the sensation of warmth. After a while I think I saw a cloud pass by. How high up was I exactly? Did the sky even have the same concept here as I was used to? I don't know how long I continued forward. My stamina was starting to deplete until I rolled up onto a protruding cliff, able to sit down and rest for a moment. How long did I continue to climb after this? My memories started to blur together and I caught myself almost stumbling off the side of the cliff. I could recall skirting alongside the cliff side, barely enough room to stand on, a very large and strange mushroom that I avoided, and even what appeared to be fish, flying through the air. Wait, did I imagine that last one? Did it not sing me a song as it passed by? Will, I heard a voice, and I looked up to see what looked like Meridia waving her legs over the side of the cliff. What? Am I really that far gone, or is something else going on? I'm pretty sure I haven't crossed into crazy territory yet. Perhaps I would have continued this question, had the figure not dispersed into a strange mist. I think this mountain was doing something to my consciousness, or rather something here was messing with me. Well, I just had to ignore it for now. Looking up, I couldn't find a good vantage point to keep going. It seemed as though I would need to find another way. My eyes darted everywhere and I noticed a small chasm to the side. The opposite end looked to be a decent place to continue upwards. I walked up, wiping away the copious amounts of snow at the ledge, getting an idea of the distance and taking a few steps back to get a running start. Leaping across, I managed to get most of my body on the ledge, able to slowly pull myself up after finding a good place to grab. Wilhelm. Another voice grabbed my attention. I saw Artoria squatting down, offering her hand. Perhaps it was a moment of weakness, because I reached out instinctively, only for my hand to go through hers and she dispersed into more mist. Fuck, I shouted, sliding down, almost falling off the side of the cliff. My foot managed to stop on a good foothold so I didn't fall down. With more strength than I wanted to muster, I was able to pull myself up and over, rolling on my back as I peered over the edge. Stupid, stupid. I whispered to myself. What the hell was going on? Was something raiding my memories or was I projecting my own towards whatever source was fucking with me? This kept going on, days, weeks. I think time began to lose meaning to me. The only semblance of the passage of time was me running low on food. Oh, it's teacher this time. I muttered, seeing a clearly fake scat hack trying to lure me somewhere. Seriously, who would fall for this, again? Maybe put your A game into it next time. I threw a rock at the little mirage, the illusion that seemed to emanate out of this mountain. I rolled my eyes as it burst into mist again, only for it to re-emerge back into her form. I just sighed, deciding to ignore whatever was going on. If it could physically affect me, it probably would have by N. Oh my. I did a double take as this time the illusion started to strip. Okay, bonus points here. I gave it a shaky thumbs up, as it tried to get me to follow it in a specific direction. I did take a few moments to just watch. Nice, I wonder how accurate that is compared to the real thing. I nodded. Huh, if I stick around long enough, will it try to do this looking like Meridia? It would be a lie to say that I didn't enjoy it when her image showed up. It had been quite a while since I've seen her. Truly, this thing is a formidable opponent. This little distraction did help relieve a small amount of mental fatigue, but my body was reaching its limit. I was exhausted. I don't know how much longer I could keep going. The only thing that kept me moving was the fact that I could see the top of the peak from here. Roughly 400 meters, if I eyed that correctly. The snowstorm seemed almost completely gone here. I could do it, I could do this. Was it getting harder as I got closer, or was I just imagining it? It was almost like a dream. Each foot up I took, I don't even remember doing it, but I saw the top coming closer and closer into view. Will, come with me. Meridia looked at me coquettishly, her familiar dress drooping slightly past her shoulder. You better pray I don't find you later. I growled, throwing a rock through the illusion. As much as I would like to see that scene, for some reason I'm actually pissed off that Meridia was being used like that. 300 meters. Will, stay with me or I'll jump off. Meridia once again appeared at the edge of the cliff. I just blinked, looking at it. Seriously? You really don't have any idea who that is then? Just borrowing the image from my subconscious? If she were truly here, this entire realm would tremble with each of her steps. I don't know why I wasted the breath saying this, but the look that the illusion gave me was satisfying. A hint of annoyance on her face before dispersing. A little more. I spoke even at the cost of my dwindling energy. 200 meters. The stones I gripped were pulled out. Maybe I would have been fine, but I saw the illusion of Meridia killing Artoria, making me tumble away back down in my very brief distraction. My arms got cut up from the jagged protrusions, but I was able to stop myself from falling further. Maybe my anger was now fueling me. I think I climbed back up faster than the first time. 100 meters. I no longer had any feeling in my arms. I looked around, but I saw nothing, so I kept going. 50 meters. Coming to the final cliff, I almost fell down again as my footing crumbled. Grabbing tight, I hefted myself up, pushing over the edge and rolling onto the top. There was something there. I could almost roll my eyes, but my energy was lacking right now. I pulled myself up, not recognizing the lower half of the figure, only to pause when I saw its face. You. I said quietly, my body trembling. A man with a familiar shade of hair. I almost ran a hand through my own out of instinct. My shaking hands forcibly curled into fists. My father. Sirs X Lucifer. Why don't you come back with me? He gave a disarming smile. We can be a family. No. I said, calming down, much to the thing's annoyance. An audible frown on its face due to my lack of reaction. Do you expect me to lash out? Or maybe jump with joy at your words? Even if you were real, I'm not that little child living by himself anymore. Was I still angry at him? Sure, I think anyone in my situation would hold on to some anger. But I'm not going to dictate any more than that towards this person. To actively hate someone requires effort. He is not worth it. I took a step forward. Neither you nor the person you imitate has any control over me. I flicked the illusion, watching it disappear for the last time. You are irrelevant. Good riddance. There was a small path up to the actual peak. The climbing was more so heaving my tired body up some stone cliff sides. I did it. I said quietly, falling to the ground, barely sitting up and taking in the view from the top. You did. Another voice answered. I looked over to see Scathack standing next to me. You've been watching me the entire time. You did good. She nodded. I didn't think you would realize your own faults early on. I was planning on having you fight your way up a large portion of the mountain. Perhaps set some stronger variants at certain locations to provide walls you had to work to break down. But it wasn't needed in the end. She shook her head with a small smile. You set the undead there. I tilted my head. That made an alarming amount of sense. Of course. She said plainly. What about those illusions? Remnants of something that I sealed here long ago, something that is neither living nor dead, yet still clings onto a chance at life by consuming the essence of anything it can get its hands on. What was the point of this? I tried to wave my arms around, but I just collapsed onto the ground. You needed to suffer. She replied without a hint of remorse. Ah, so you're a sadist. She walked up to me, lightly tapping the butt of her spear on my forehead. If I wasn't pleased with your progress, I would have smacked you for that. She frowned slightly. The dragon spoke of me at length of your issues. I agreed with him after some deliberation. You have never suffered before, nor have you ever needed to. Some battles may have pushed you to your limits, but it is not the same. I never swung my sword until my arms hurt, I never cast my spells until my voice was hoarse. I never truly trained in any capacity. You understand. She looked pleased. You were arrogant because of what you inherited, thinking never to push beyond your own limits. You had never truly suffered before. I have never had a student with your particular situation. I needed to devise a new strategy. Does that mean you'll unseal my power? I asked. It would be pointless to keep you from utilizing your strengths any longer. We shall begin your true training tomorrow, for now though. She placed her hand on my forehead. Rest, you have earned a small reprieve. My eyes closed, involuntarily, and I welcomed the darkness. Scat hack POV. I carried my new student to an empty bed in the castle. Such thoughts I did not think I would have ever again. How long has it been since another living being had stepped foot inside this land of shadows? I no longer took note of the passing days, it became meaningless after a certain time. To actually have someone seek me out once more, to venture into this deathly place for my tutelage, it was a strange feeling. I accepted him immediately, something I had not done often in the past. It was supposed to be a test to simply arrive here, the treacherous perils that awaited one who stepped into my realm. If they couldn't even appear before me, why must I teach them? I suppose there had been a few exceptions in the past. Not all my students were like Satanta, some had moved me purely on their own willpower and valor, even if they did not record their names in the myths and legends. But to come here, in this time from his place, I believed that to be testament enough. This realm no longer was connected to the wider world. I have merely guesses as to how he arrived, the dragon filling in some pieces. What do they call the great magics outside? True magic. Such things are something I am incompatible with. In my time all magic was just magic. The last visitors were those undead things that started sprouting in the world once the age of gods finally came to its end. Those disgusting creatures that subside from human blood to continue their cursed existence. Yes, the dragon helped fill in several details, telling me some things about the outside world in our chat. A dragon. I couldn't help but chuckle at the thought. I have met dragons before, I have killed dragons, never had I shared a conversation with one, not to mention one who boasted such power. How I would have loved to test my spear against its mighty scales, maybe it would have been able to kill me. Was I excited when my new student arrived in front of me? I wanted to test his worth, to see what I was working with, so I engaged him in battle, my spear seeking his heart on the first thrust. He was, not the worst I've taught so far. Potential. That was the best way to describe it. The dragon had told me some things, the boy's situation, to be related to such a grand figure, he would go very far in life. But he was wasting it, relying too much on who he was, as opposed to who he is now. There was no fire in his belly, no drive to truly surpass himself, to become something more. But even so, feelings I hadn't felt in a very long time swelled up. My hands itched, my desire to groom him into a warrior. I decided to toss him on that cursed mountain. I wished to see him push himself and work to achieve his first results, otherwise he would take everything further for granted. To have him suffer, to experience hardship to achieve his goals. He wasn't as bad as my other brat who I had to beat the arrogance out of, but I saw the seeds beginning to sprout, it was better to nip those in the bud. I was delighted to see him understand his own flaws by himself. My intention was to continuously send undead at him, forge him through combat, but he decided to stay at the base of the mountain and hone his own blade. Less than a month, yet the progress he made in that short amount of time was substantial. It was to be expected, he had so much bubbling under the surface, waiting to be let loose. I allowed him his time to hone his own skill, not interfering. It was amusing to watch him swing his sword for days on end, focusing so intently for the first time. How his movements become sharper and cleaner with each hour that passes. Certainly, no master yet, but he took a large step forward. Watching him climb the mountain, for others it may have been monotonous, but I watched every moment without a hint of boredom. Even when that wretched divine spirit tried its games again, persisting through time purely on resentment, not even a proper undead abomination, something in between and forever sealed inside the mountain. It projects illusions to lure things into it, or to kill them so it can absorb their essence. I could only sigh thinking back to how Satanta was tricked the very first time. The most infuriating part was that he knew they were fake, but he still wanted to lay with it regardless. How amusing it was to see me show up. Was that from my student's own desires or simply borrowing a familiar form? Maybe I shall have to teach him more than just combat. I frowned, shaking my head. Maybe he could also. No. There was no need to think such thoughts. Young, too young. It was the same with Satanta, he was born too late. Why bother creating hope? I have resolved myself to watch the end of time from here. Wilhelm POV. I woke up to the unfamiliar ceiling, castle walls on all sides and a soft bed underneath me. How comfortable after sleeping on that mountain for so long, and the warmth, how one doesn't realize how good they have it until it's gone. My body was sore, but my fatigue seemed gone. Did she heal me? I checked myself over, no noticeable scars on my body from where I had gotten hurt. I opened my magic circuits immediately, feeling the soothing pain of magical energy running through my body. My ring was sitting on a table. I looked it over before slipping it back on. Slipping my mind into it, I saw all my stuff there, except I was missing a large bout of mead and wine I grabbed from Skyrim. This tragedy will not go unanswered. I walked out of my room, looking around and heading outside. I saw here, mediating in the same place she was from before. You are awake. She said simply. Thank you for healing me. I bowed politely, completely forgetting my faux anger. Am I not your teacher? She turned around to look at me, an ephemeral smile on her face. You have gained quite a few things. I don't really feel different. I furrowed my brow. I mean, I feel great after having climbed that thing after so long, to actually achieve that, but I don't feel noticeably stronger or anything. She hummed, sitting up fully, grabbing her spear that always remained within arm's reach. I brought out Mirage, the safe feeling of handing it in my hand again. How I missed you, my beautiful sword. Without warning, she jumped into the air and lunged at me, erupting in magical energy and bloodlust as her deathly spear once again sought out my heart. As her spear approached, I stepped to the side, bring my blade up to meet her instead, sword moving horizontally under her spear. She leaned back, riding the momentum to slide under my attack, only a few strands of hair flying off from her head. She adjusted her grip on her spear, digging her feet into the ground and utilizing her lower center of gravity to swipe at my legs with a large sweep. I quickly spun my sword, recovering from my own attack, and slammed the tip into the tundra, blocking her strike. Scat-Hack abandoned that avenue attack quicker than it took me to blink, her elbow swinging towards my face, only to meet the palm of my hand. My hand struggled to hold her back. Still think you gain nothing? She raised an eyebrow. I released my grip, and she lowered her arm. I didn't even realize where that came from. That was, wow, it felt so fluid and easy. I mean, it wasn't anything spectacular, Scat-Hack was holding back substantially, but it just all felt right. Don't get cocky. A fist found my face, disrupting my thoughts. Son of a bitch. I shouted, clutching my nose, blood running down my face. I swear to every god, she did something to make it particularly painful. You are just a larger insect now, you wouldn't even last a few moves from me if I were going all out. She said coldly. You are merely at the step where it is worthwhile to teach you. White light erupted from my hand, healing my broken nose. I stared at her in annoyance, she didn't seem the least bit remorseful. Only a few moves. That was being generous. She dismissed me easily. If you could land a true hit on me, I would even allow you into my bed. Wait, what? Don't daydream, boyo. She smacked me upside the head. You are too far away to even consider laying with me. She laughed. I shall begin passing down my teachings, your usage of runes was an abomination, I will not allow someone under my tutelage such disgrace. That is, fair. I've been mainly abusing my near-infinite magical energy to do what I wanted. I thought it through. Your swordsmanship too, it leaves much to be desired. I have seen women trained by their maids having better sword skills than you. She shook her head with a frown. I chose not to comment on that. My final student. She turned around, looking towards the horizon. I shall forge you into a great warrior. Your magic, your martial ability. I will help you master your weapons and pull out your potential. She turned back to me again. Let us start with your runes. When you move to a standard that satisfies me, I shall pass down the primordial runes. I froze, hearing what she said. Primordial runes, they were so much stronger than the modern runes used in today's magecraft. An art passed down by Odin, a path created by a pantheon head. It was something that can be used against divine beings, something dragons and servants couldn't just shrug off. There was a reason they were nowhere to be found in the modern day, they literally had to be passed down. A few years ago, the magical community went crazy when a primordial rune was discovered in an old pat unearthed in Norway. Yet, even the person who obtained that object, they only gained an incomplete understanding. I'm ready when you are. She smiled at me. Those are the words I wish to hear the most. If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.